So, I wanted to talk about God's brilliant plan again, but I wanted to focus on one area which I haven't really discussed, which is the aspect of humanity within God's overall brilliant plan. No doubt about it, atheists and theists can probably agree on one thing, and that's that we are imperfect creatures. And for example, the Bible depicts us as a bunch of sinners who are deserving of eternal torment, but with the salvation of God and accepting Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, you can avoid all of that crap. We're also a pretty stubborn race, generally, considering our limitations. I mean, yeah, our senses are fairly advanced in the evolutionary tree, but considering how advanced they are, there's a lot of room for error in terms of interpretation of what we observe in the natural world. For example, most supernatural phenomena have perfectly reasonable and natural explanations to explain why these things happen rather than needing to invoke the supernatural. And as another example, human beings have been known to hallucinate, whether psychosomatically or through other physical causes. This can cause people to believe that certain things that are happening fantastically in their own mind are happening in reality, when that's not the case. With this in mind, though, if this God supposedly loves us so and wants us all to connect with Him and essentially allow us to go to heaven with him, why does he feel the need to allow us human beings to do the talking for him? Especially considering that human beings tend to be pretty unreliable in terms of just pure observation. This god doesn't really have a good sound foundation in his plan in regards to spreading his word. And this isn't even mentioning the supposed virtue of faith, which I personally believe is not much of a virtue at all, but complete and astounding willful ignorance that just makes everyone feel warm and fuzzy inside because everybody happens to be doing it. And furthermore, to add confusion to the mix, God supposedly allows liars and false prophets into his whole scheme in spreading his word. So assholes like the current pope and several members of the clergy who do get away with essentially molesting children are also part of spreading his word, which is supposedly all good, all loving, and representative of this all good, all loving God. And I guess the cherry on top of this shit sundae would be several centuries worth of his supposed tools on Earth, which are supposed to represent him in all his glory, causing all sorts of havoc and using his word as leverage to try and levy themselves up into a position of power. And all the while oppressing and killing and silencing anyone who says otherwise. So, not only is this woeful incompetence from the part of a supposedly omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent God to use such flawed tools to spread his word, it's also rather unfair when you think about it. Take this for example. A person is in the exact same situation I just described. They use Christian doctrine to levy themselves into a position of power and silence anyone who thinks otherwise. So for those who are silenced, the oppressed minority, how could you blame them for thinking badly of Christianity in general when all they've seen or known is people making assholes of themselves and trying to justify it with "because God told me so"? How could you think any worse of these people for having the wrong impression or a bad impression of Christianity and the Christian God? So overall, I just think that this God's plan is a complete train wreck. This system he uses is not accurate, at least relative to our modern morality. It's not accurate whatsoever in determining whether someone should be worthy of eternal torment or eternal happiness. It's not practical at all because he's using tools to spread his word that are not only flawed but counterproductive in spreading what he actually wants people to hear. And even if these tools weren't flawed, his message isn't even necessarily one of peace or humility or acceptance. So, I end my video by asking theists, if this God is supposedly all-powerful and wants us all to gain passage into heaven, why does he need you to do all his PR work for him here on Earth? Thanks for watching. May the truth always be heard.